Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of naming your priorities. And we're going to look at this through the lens of the Pareto Principle, which I'll share a little bit, but you may have heard also as the 20-80 rule. And also thinking about it in several different domains of our life, thinking about it work, at home, and in relationship to ourselves. We have so many opportunities, right, to pay attention to so many different things and to be capable of doing so many different things these days that it's very easy to end up feeling scattered, as though nothing you are doing is really having an impact. And when we're feeling that way, it's very easy to become overwhelmed, frustrated, to feel, again, like we're just not moving the needle. And so often when people are talking to me about where they're struggling, there is this very real phenomenon of too much on the to-do list. There's too many places to focus attention in our work lives and our home lives, as well as when it comes to self-care. And so let's dive in a little bit deeper detail and talk about how we can start to get out of overwhelm in this regard. So the Pareto Principle, or like I said, the 80-20 rule, is something that you may have heard of before, and it is based off a phenomenon that was first noticed by Vilfredo Pareto. I may be pronouncing that wrong, but that's how I'm saying it, who was an Italian polymath who first noticed that about 20% of the people in Italy were landowners and owned about 80% of the land. This principle that a small vital few are controlling a much bigger sort of segment or section of population or outcome has been looked at in a variety of different settings, including in economics, where we see that perhaps 20% of a company's output might produce 80% of the results. It's been looked at in other places in healthcare, where we see about the top 20% highest utilizers within healthcare consume about 80% of the resources that are spent when we look at insurance claims. There's a variety of places where this can be examined, but what I really want to focus on today is this idea that there are a small number of priorities in your life that, when you can get very clear on, can produce a very large impact, an 80% impact on your ability to succeed, grow, learn, expand, kind of whatever we are looking for in our lives. And so we're going to, again, look at that in the lens of looking at our work, by which I really mean sort of our professional interests and development, looking at in the home setting, and then turning attention to ourselves, which I would argue is the most important place where this makes a difference. But because we often struggle to talk about ourselves, we're going to start with talking about work. When we are talking about work, I want to be clear that what I mean here is not your employed position if you're employed, but really your professional interests and skills and how you are interested in cultivating and growing those so that you can maximize your impact. So I am a family medicine provider, right? I'm trained as a generalist. Although over the years, I have cultivated more specialty and more interest in certain areas. I've done a lot of women's health. I used to deliver babies. I currently am doing obesity medicine. And the more that I focus in on what is important to me and naming those priorities, it's easier for me to see what steps do I need to take to really hone that expertise and attract more of those patients so that I get to do more of what I'm really interested and skilled in doing? And I think a lot of us haven't really sat down to think about our careers that way, especially for primary care people. But you know that even if you love a lot of different health conditions, there may be particular patient groups, there might be particular disease states, there might be, some little segment that really gets your curiosity going, that really engages with you. And you would like to spend more time doing that, right? And you would like to have more of an impact, perhaps, with those patients, with that disease state, whatever that looks like for you. When you can name your priorities, when you can sit down and identify a few areas or, again, a few patient sort of segments that you would really like to work with, you can start to get very clear on what it is that you want to do more of, where you might need to develop some skills, and start to really focus your attention. And it's not to say that we are necessarily excluding other things or saying that we are not going to see other things, but the more that we cultivate interest and curiosity and talk about the things that we're really interested in serving, the more that we will get to do in those areas. Let me give you an example. I have a small cohort of clients that I'm working with who are really interested in expanding their expertise in breastfeeding medicine. They are pursuing their lactation consultant certifications. They are, producing content for breastfeeding moms. They're really interested in expanding their practice to include more of that. And the more that they do, the more that they talk that up, the more that they, cultivate relationships with others who might refer to them, the more of that work that they get to do, which naturally pushes other things they're less interested or skilled in off their plates. There's an opportunity here to be very intentional about the things that you like, even if you are an employed physician and maybe you can't declare that you won't exclude such and such thing, right? But if you become known as the person in your clinic or the person in your area who is excellent at breastfeeding medicine, guess what's going to happen? People will associate you with that thing. You get to do more of what you like, and doors start to open up for you in that arena. Most of us are not used to thinking about our career and our personal development this way, especially, I would say, if you are a primary care provider, right? We have often been trained with this mindset that we should be broadly skilled, that we should take care of anyone, anything. And although, again, we may not exclude parts of our practice, we naturally want to do more of things that we really like and enjoy. And there's room for that within medicine, right? There's so much need for people to, really cultivate a desire to serve certain things really well. And breastfeeding medicine is just a really easy example there because it's not something that most of us learned about. Similarly, in my obesity medicine work, I've spent time really learning about the science of obesity and all of the backwards things that we were taught, if we were taught anything at all, about what leads to excess adiposity and how do we treat that and, cultivating healthy relationships with food in our bodies. There's so much there that I get really excited about that I really want to lean into doing more of. And it's taken me being intentional, speaking up about it, letting people know that I have this interest in this expertise, getting additional training, seeking out the appropriate resources so that I can really build a practice that highlights that specializes in that. And that has been something that has brought me a lot of joy and a lot of satisfaction. So even if at this point in time, you feel that it's difficult for you to sort of make any traction in something that you're interested in, be really clear with yourself. What are your priorities? What do you want to advance in yourself? That could be leadership. It could be an area of clinical medicine, right? It could be teaching. There's a variety of different ways that can look. But the more that you sort of lean in and get excited about that, the better the outcome is going to be. So that is identifying what is your 20% there that is going to make the most impact on improving your job satisfaction, perhaps helping you transition into a new area that you want to focus on. let's name our priorities there. Okay, so that is one way to look at it through the work lens. We might also look at it from an efficiency perspective with our work, that there are a small number of important tasks that we do that make the most impact when it comes to our revenue or our patient care in some way, right? We need to write the note in order to complete the bill. And doing those things is what results in the money coming in, more so than answering the email. Now, many of us don't have a choice whether we answer the patient message, right, if it has been directed to us, but we probably don't want to spend a lot of time responding to our patient messages and writing these big, long paragraphs, because that is not actually in our current model of insurance-based healthcare what actually makes the most impact. And unfortunately, when we are thinking about trying to utilize our skills best in, again, our often very broken healthcare systems, naming our priorities within that can also really to identify what are the tasks that really need to be done in order to stay financially viable. We could talk more about that, but that is not really something that excites most of us. That is something that I think is important to keep in the big picture, and it'll make sense as we talk about other areas. But really, naming your priorities in terms of your professional development and your professional skills and expertise is an important step in being able to create a future state where you get to do more of what you love. Let's talk a little bit now about how this looks at home. If you run a household in some respect, right? You have perhaps a house that you own, or perhaps that you rent or lease. You have other people living with you, or pets, or people, and sort of tasks that you need to do at home. Most of us would agree that there are potentially an infinite number of chores, tasks, and things that we could be doing around the house, enough to fill up overly, kind of what is in our day. And it's very easy to get sucked down the rabbit hole of micromanaging things or spending a lot of brain energy on things that really don't make a big difference. And here again, naming your priorities about what is most important. And we can think about this in our relationships at home. We can think about this in terms of, keeping a dwelling going, whatever that looks like for you. Naming what's really most important and that makes the biggest difference is going to be very individual. For example, some people might have a really strong interest in having a home that is very comfortable, relaxing, and a place that people enjoy spending time. What are going to be, the important things that make the most difference? It's probably not going to be having the house that's as completely tidy and crumb-free as possible, right? It's probably going to be cultivating an environment where people feel comfortable relaxing, hanging out, where they have comfortable places to sit, where, perhaps it's easy to pull out snacks for people if people are dropping by, right? Really to be intentional about what is it that makes this home very comfortable and relaxing and inviting, and really focusing your efforts around that. There might be other priorities that people find are really important. And again, if we sort of think about this, we can think about it both from the family perspective or, the relationship perspective, as well as the house. There are some parts of your house or wherever it is that you live that are going to be the most important to focus your attention to. I give this example often because this comes up a lot. Sometimes we will procrastinate on something that's important by doing something minute, like cleaning out the junk drawer. Now, if you have all the time in the world and you want to maintain a clean, pristine, beautiful junk drawer, you have my blessing to go for it. But for most of us, if we work a job, if we have relationships, if we have a family to support, having a pristinely clean junk drawer doesn't have very much of an impact on creating, for example, that comfortable, restful home. And so if we can really name the priorities, it makes it easier to see that cleaning the junk drawer isn't going to get us to where we want to go, right? It is definitely an 80% activity, meaning that it has very little impact on what we really want the results of our home to be. Now, we talk in other episodes about, this as a procrastination technique, right? Like we might not want to do our notes. And so we pick some other silly little task so we can feel this little hit of dopamine from accomplishing it. That's an area for a different topic, right? A different day. But I really want us to think about when it comes to things that are important to us at home, what is it that we actually want? This might apply as well, when you are looking for a new place to live, like what is the most important thing for us when we were looking for a new home? It was important that we had a play space for our kids and that we had a great kitchen because we love to cook, right? So it was very easy to focus in on places that had those things ready to go. If we are thinking about our relationships with those who are at home with us, or relationships with friends or other family members, even if they are not living in the same home with us, what is the most important thing or things that are really essential? Been thinking about this a lot because a lot of the women physicians that I work with are moms and they are working moms. And often feeling like because they are working and because they are away from the house, that they have to do extra to take care of their kids at home, including taking over little tasks such as getting them water when they ask for it, doing all the laundry, not having them do chores because of this sense of mom guilt. And if we really can step back and we can really decide for ourselves that our priorities are to have a really good connection with our kids, right? To be able to talk and spend quality time with them, then probably us doing all their chores and being further drained and, sort of subserviently just doing whatever it is that they ask is not actually building connection and loving relationships like we want, right? Spending time with them, even if it's small amounts of quality time, again, we're thinking 20% of the effort produces 80% of the results. So what that might mean is you might not have hours per day to spend with your child or your spouse, but if you pay attention and you have really intentional quality time with them, where you're present, where you're doing something that you enjoy, where you're cultivating laughter and connection, that produces a huge amount of the results of your relationship, which is not going to happen when we are doing chores for our kids or keeping our kids from doing chores or making them, see that mom is the person who does all the things. So it's a little bit of a walk here to get through to this argument of all the things that come up at home. But I hope you can see that when we're really clear on what it is that is important to us, maybe a comfortable home that people enjoy spending time in, maybe, really being clear on, I want high quality relationships with my kids, even if I don't have lots and lots of time to spend with them. When we are very clear on what those priorities are, it's easier to see what's getting in the way, what we want to focus less time on attention on, maybe what we need to ask for help on, or maybe what we need to hire help for, right? If there are activities at home that don't bring you joy, that don't need to be done by you, is there something that you could ask somebody else to do? Again, whether that's other people living in your home or people that you can hire. I love cooking. I would never hire cooking out, but there are other household tasks like cleaning the house I'm not interested in, and it doesn't need to be me. And so when we made that decision to hire people to come and clean our house, it was one of the best things because we did not have the time. We did not want to be spending our limited home and free time doing that, right? It becomes much easier when we can see that our priority is spending quality time together as a family. So that is really sort of thinking about this principle and how it relates to home, again, including physical spaces in which we live and the people that we live with or, are in relationship with. Let's talk about self. And I want us to think about this time with self and what makes the most difference in terms of where you want to be in your life and, how you want to show up in the world. Again, there are a small number of things that have a greater impact than other sorts of self-care that you could be doing. And when you are clear on what those things are, then it's much easier to let go of other things. A major area where this came up for me is when I started getting up early in the morning to go on a walk. I noticed how much better my day went. So it was a small focus of time, right? And it was both the exercise component as well as the quiet self time, during which I like to listen to podcasts, but sometimes you might want some quiet space. When I did that, and when I did that in particular before my family woke up, I noticed a dramatic improvement on my energy level during the day, my sort of attitude and my emotional states. I was starting with me very first thing in the morning, and it made a huge difference. And so that stands out to me as that is something that's in my 20%. That is something that remains very important and a high priority for me because it makes such a difference. Now, it does require that I go to bed at a decent time so that I can get up early, right? There is some give and take there. But because I'm so clear with myself on the impact that has on the rest of my day, it's much easier to make that decision to go to bed early. And I don't want to suggest at all that I'm perfect on that because I am not perfect on that. But I know that when I get up early, when I go and do that thing for myself, my days go better. So for you, what are those priorities and what's really important? And can you get more clear, more granular on what it is that you need in order to feel more like yourself, whatever that looks like? Do you need more time that is quiet? Do you need more play and fun and engagement? Are you someone who likes to create things and that's really relaxing and restorative to you and you feel like you're more yourself when you do that? Each one of us has different areas that are our priorities, but no one can name this for us. And everyone's priorities are going to be a little bit different, right? So being very clear, what is it that actually is something that I love? And when I can get very clear on that, when I can dedicate space to that, I will be so much more restful, relaxed, less overwhelmed. I will be so much more ready for the rest of the challenges of my day that things in my life will feel better. This is an area that I think, again, we don't talk enough about, but when we are very clear on our priorities coming from us as humans who have all the thoughts and feelings and, curiosities and complexities that is intrinsic to us, when we can be very clear on those things, it gives us so much more agency to focus on those things. And that naturally allows other things to fall off the list. If I know that it's important to me to take that time for myself in the morning, then I'm not going to schedule other things at that time, right? I'm not going to stay up late binging on shows or scrolling social media. Although I do have to remind myself sometimes that that is the case. So I hope you can see, and again, this looks very different for everybody, but when we are finding ourselves frequently feeling overwhelmed, when we find ourselves feeling burned out, when we find ourselves sort of so stuck in our patterns, if we can step back from the busyness of our lives for a little bit to be very clear on what our priorities are, what it is that we need more of in our lives, what lights us up, what relaxes us, what interests us, where are our passions, it makes it easier to identify where to spend more of your time. We have talked many times on this show too about the very real phenomenon that there is always going to be more that is possible for us to do than any one person can do. This is true within medicine, right? There are more tasks that need to be done to quote unquote adequately take care of a quote unquote full panel of patients in primary care, right? I'm sure there's many other places where we could look at this in medicine. I cite this study a lot, right? 26.7 hours per day for a primary care, out of a 24-hour day for a primary care physician to complete all the tasks necessary to provide adequate acute care, chronic care, vaccines, preventative care, responding to lab results and imaging studies. There is literally not enough time in the day to do that, right? So when we can get clear that there are more things possible in our lives, at work, at home, than any one of us can do, and we can decide to choose our priorities based on what we want, not what somebody else is handing us, we are able to create a better experience for ourselves. We are able to focus in and get what we want more of. Most of us have not been taught to do this. Most of us did not see this modeled in our homes growing up. And most of us will never receive explicit permission from other people at work and at home to go and do this. But it makes such a difference when we can be clear on what we love, what we want more of, how we want to prioritize things, and what we're willing to let go of. Whether that is actively letting go of something, knowingly letting go of something, or just letting things kind of fall where they may. If chores around the house don't get done, but they're not that important, then they're not that important, right? If it's important to someone else, then they can help to make sure that that thing happened. But if it's not important to me, then it's going to fall down. And that's okay. I hope that this discussion really helps us to see that sitting down and naming our priorities makes a huge difference in the development of what we want more of in our lives. And again, it's not something that most of us have thought about. It's not something that most of us were taught, but really so critical to building lives that we really want. I'm going to wrap it up there for today. Thank you so much for listening, as always. And please take the time to rate and review the show. That really helps to, build our visibility as a podcast, as well as sharing it with other people in your life, whether they are medical people or not. I think there's so much space for us to be able to talk more about what is important in our lives. And all of us are really craving to live what Brené Brown calls a more wholehearted existence, right? Where we find a balance of professional curiosity, where we find meaningful relationships, where we find a really deep and rich sense of self, right? And being able to be ourselves. And so that is what I hope to bring to you, in terms of this podcast. And so I hope that you find that valuable, and I hope that you will pass it on. My friends, thank you so much for listening as always. And until next time, take care. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.